this is the dump trailer that's going to go behind the brown truck. And one of the big issues that we've had with it, even behind my King Ranch, is when we dump it all the way, the back of the trailer like drags the ground. So like, it's fine whenever there's no weight in the trailer, but once it gets weighed down, especially when we overload it, because we're not going across scales. I mean, it's pretty typical that I put a couple extra tons in there. It has a problem with like basically trying to drag in front of like the back tailgate forward. So if you're on an uphill slope or it's muddy or something like that, we've gotten stuck a couple of times already. So with the brown truck being taller than this truck, it's going to exaggerate that issue. What we're going to do to solve that is called a spring over. So these are drop beam axles. The tube sits below the axle center line down here. And the idea with that is whenever you put weight on it, it's supposed to stabilize this axle. This isn't going to be the most stable way of doing it. A better idea would be to build like a drop cradle and actually move all the spring mounts down and keep it in a spring under configuration. But with the spring over, I'll get the height that I need, and it's easily reversible in the future, because this isn't something that I maybe want to keep. I may end up selling this trailer, and doing this will work great off-road. It'll work fine for the 8-minute drive that we take between the quarry and where the property is. It's only like 5 minutes or 5 miles, and I think the speed limit's like 35 to 45 miles an hour between there. So it should be plenty safe for that. But we've got to get some altitude out of this thing and get that bumper off the ground so that we can use it. Are they like all busted up from dragging the ground?
I don't know, that one's just weird.
That's what was going on with the other side. It was like it had drug the ground so much that the socket didn't want to fit on the nut. Here. Take this thing, like, just thread it on there, and then, and you can just like pop the socket back off. Except for the threads are like completely gold up on the end.
Yeah.
There we go. Amazing.
Nice.
Yeah, those threads are jacked. We're probably gonna have to go get new U-bolts. I wonder if Tractor Supply is gonna have like a full set of 8.
Yeah, this one's kind of messed up.
Just run it home. Alright, so now that we have the U-bolts out, we've got to drop the spring. We're going to basically drop the rear pivot, or the rear mount and the front mount, and leave the center pivot in place. So leaf springs will drop out in the middle. We'll let the axles fall to the ground, put the leaf springs back up in place, and then I've got some new saddles or spring perches, whatever you want to call them, that we'll put back on top of the axle. We'll lift it back up in place, put the U-bolts on, put the spring plate on, and let that hold it in place, and then we'll buzz those new mounts onto the axle tubes. Need me a bigger pecker. Of course, it doesn't want to come out. All right. I wonder if anybody's going to understand my sarcasm. Of course, this axle is like rotating lubricated itself. This is how you rip your trailer wiring apart. Which I wouldn't be that worried about because these freaking little clips, worst way to wire anything. We've got both axles out now. We've got all 4 springs bolted back up in place. These little perches that I've got right here, I got from like Tractor Supply. They're just, you know, universal. They're gonna go on this tube here. So before we mount these up in place, we're gonna take a wire wheel. We're going to just go ahead and clean the paint off this so I have like a good spot to weld to. But you can see what I was talking about with the axle being dropped. We're basically, instead of the spring sitting here and the axle sitting on top of the spring, we're going to mount this on top, and that's going to go to the bottom of our spring. We're just going to flip our U-bolts and plates around so that they go up and sandwich it all together. And I wasn't too worried about the wiring when we pulled these axles out because I knew to get them out of the way that we were going to have to cut them anyway. And I don't like those little snap clip connectors. I'm going to actually heat shrink and put some good butt splices in there. So let's say you got to put an axle on with a leaf spring on top of it, which you can do so that you don't have to manhandle it. Go ahead and just throw your U-bolt through the top plate, start your nuts. I will time lapse being done. Obviously this is taking too fucking long. So instead of having to hold the axle up and fight through that whole goat rope that I just did, start your U-bolt spring plate, stick your perch on there, lift your axle up into place, and you can just horseshoe your spring plate around there, and it's hung. And then you don't have to sit here and hold it up and try to get your spring plate on there and center everything and get the nut started. It's a lot easier. Alright, so now the axles are underneath the springs, and all we've got to do is come in here and run a weld on each side of this, put the wheels and tires back on. This is now sprung over. As you can see, we got the trailer sitting level. We ended up lifting it like 6 inches. It wound up being actually a little bit low even still. So it's not quite level, but it's way better than it was. Oh, here it is all the way lifted up and dumped. And you can already see, I mean, when this thing is flat, the frame rail sits here and the back of the trailer sits like way up here. So there's a good 18 inches that it drops whenever the bed goes all the way up. When that happened before and those springs were compressed from the weight, and this thing would just catch, and it's, you know, it's angled this way, it would dig into the ground, you get stuck really badly. Now, have plenty of room, can back up into a pile, dump, drive out, have no issues at all. I don't understand why they built this trailer as low as they did, and it's not like it's just load trail. All of the trailers seem to be built this way. Maybe it's just the 16 footers that have the overhang in the back, but either way, this worked out great.